All right, welcome back to another episode of the Cameo Podcast. This episode is brought to you by Brendan Shaw Real Estate. For residential and commercial real estate advice, call Kamloops Boutique Real Estate Agency, Brendan Shaw Real Estate. That's one of the options Brendan sent me when he agreed to sponsor a podcast. And that's been sitting in my inbox for far too long because it took me a while to set this podcast up. So, as some added value, thank you, Brendan. I'm going to read the other one as well. Welcome back to another episode of Cameo Podcast. This episode is brought to you by the realtors at Brendan Shaw Real Estate. Call 778-471-1498 to speak to residential and commercial real estate experts in Kamloops, or visit brendanshaw.com for contact info. Thank you so much for stepping up and replying to one of my tweets about possibly sponsoring this episode. My next guest, I kind of booked him off of Twitter, and we were just talking about Twitter 2 minutes ago. I invited him to smoke a joint with me on 420. Not 420. Was it 420? No, October 20. October 17th.
Yeah.
Which is 710.
That's right.
It was
1710.
1710, which is a joke in the cannabis community of oil. My next guest, let me see if I get this right. Veterinarian, TRU instructor, MLA, mayor, probably city councilor.
City councilor first.
City councilor, and now cannabis tycoon.
Well, some people would characterize me that way, although with the way the stocks have been dropping the last couple of months, that I think just cannabis industry is appropriate now. Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility for Hexo Corporation.
And of course, I'm speaking to Terry Lake, who is one of the two Kamloops connections we have to, Hall/Gatineau/ I don't know, is that Ottawa? Is that Ontario or is that Quebec?
Gatineau is in Quebec, of course, Ottawa in Ontario. So that whole capital region is very integrated. You know, you're going across the border twice a day, across the bridges.
So what exactly is your title and what does that mean?
I'm Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility, which in essence, if you think of someone like me as the conscience of the company. So I ensure that our operations are thinking about our environmental footprint when we're growing the plant, so reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, our water use, making sure we're recycling, and then also on the social responsibility side, making sure people are using our product responsibly by providing information to either our medical patients or our consumers, adult use consumers, and also giving back to the community. So we are big supporters of food banks in the Ottawa-Gatineau area. We also support Ottawa Riverkeeper, which is an environmental organization, and the Red Cross. For instance, we had some tornadoes that came through and really wiped out a couple of neighborhoods, one in Hull, one in Ottawa. So we donated $25,000 to the Red Cross. So cannabis can do a lot of good in the world if we take this kind of attitude.
When did you start taking interest in cannabis? Because for me, I tried it once in grade 9, smoked it out of a water bottle with aluminum foil, which you should never do.
No.
And then never touched it again until I was 18, living on the Ottawa River, whitewater kayaking and rafting.
Well, I think the first time I used cannabis was probably in grade 11, and that was back in, what's now known as West Kelowna. It was West Bank back then, back in the 70s. I was, basketball player, volleyball player, soccer player, and was a team. We drank beer. We occasionally smoked pot, although it really wasn't my thing because I'm really anti-smoking. I was the only child in our family who did not smoke, and my parents smoked, and I just hated the thought of smoking anything. And then I just left it alone for decades, really, and became interested when I was health minister. The use of cannabis for a medication was interesting to me, but it was a federal program, so we didn't have a lot to do with it. But of course, once the federal government announced they were going to legalize it, people would ask me as health minister, what did I think about that? So I was happy to give them my thoughts about legalization, which would be taking something prohibited, unregulated, of unknown quality, and put it into a highly regulated, safe environment where we could take that money and instead of having it in the black market, bring it into the illicit market and make sure we're paying taxes, make sure we're employing people, they're paying taxes, and we can give back to social responsibility in the way that I outlined earlier. But really, I became really interested when my daughter, Stephanie, who's a South Cam graduate, she's doing her PhD at UBC in public health, and she really started looking at the impact of heavy cannabis use on people that were being treated for HIV. So she was presenting at a conference in New York City back in March of 2016, I believe. And I went down with her and, just thought, this would be interesting to see your kid present the scientific paper and learn a little bit about cannabis. And I was just fascinated by the science behind the plant, which I really knew nothing about, and also the challenge of a public policy shift that, take something that's in the black market, totally unregulated, and then bring it into the legal regulated market. So, one thing led to another, and a good friend of mine previously from Kamloops, Adam Miron, who was one of the co-founders of Hydropothecary, as our company was known back then, gave me a call and asked me to join the company. And, the rest is history. It's been about 16 months of a real education for me, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me that you actually have such a lengthy background with the plant, which, people of the cannabis community, of course, are looking at some of these big business enterprises as culture vultures, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's a fair criticism, and I fit that kind of criticism. But the reality is that if you're going to legalize something, you've got to put the best people, whether they're from the black market or from other areas of business or government, you've got to put them all together to get the best synthesis and the best product.
So I guess then the next question to build off that is, like, as someone who considers them part of the cannabis community, though my wife does not appreciate that, how do you expect, as like a social person, to use like the idea that you're a $1 billion startup, right? Like where cannabis has always been such a grassroots movement, to then literally go talking about extremes? Like, those are two extremes, right?
Right.
How can you take the consciousness of like respecting the cannabis culture while still being a $1 billion startup?
Well, you actually can. You can, but you have to remember that the sort of cannabis culture that we think of from the past isn't really the cannabis culture of the future. I mean, part of it will be.
Totally.
Much like, people who have appreciated wine will still appreciate wine, and for different reasons than other people drink wine. So we'll always have that, cannabis aficionado that is looking for the best bud and, the best terpene profile, etc.
Which is a whole thing beyond me. I can't understand terpenes for the life of me.
But you also have other people like me who are using cannabis for its wellness properties, not for getting high. So I use CBD every day, and I use CBD because I think it helps modulate my mood, keeps me sort of more even-keeled. It helps with my sleep. I was on prescription sleeping medication for 5 years, and I've weaned myself off. And I think the CBD has helped. Although, I know there could be a placebo effect there for sure, but whatever works, baby.
I'm going through the same thing with my doctor, right? I got off my antidepressants because I just want to smoke weed. But my wife doesn't like the smoke, and it's not fast, so I now vape it, right? But it's also, I can't get concentrates on the legal market, right? As what I would consider a medical consumer now, how do you think, how long do you think this transitional period is going to take as we kind of duke it out?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Evan, because people are impatient. Some people thought on October 17th, boom, everything would be unpackaged and it would be, a fully mature market. And it certainly isn't. If you look at Washington State, Colorado, 5 years down the track, they're still evolving and still working out some bugs in the system. But, it's a lot different down there than it is here. And this is going to take probably 3 to 5 years for us to really mature as a cannabis market. Now, in terms of concentrates, in terms of edible products, that will come on stream in 2019. They just released the regulations for consultation. So now we can see what that kind of market will look like. But it's still very restrictive in Canada in terms of the packaging, the promotion, how you talk about cannabis. I hope as we all get comfortable with cannabis in terms of the government, in terms of the public, that some of those restrictions will be relaxed and we'll be able to have a more kind of adult informed conversation about cannabis.
Yeah. I've always wanted to do like a live debate of stoned versus sober, of me get stoned and argue with someone as a live internet troll while being stoned. But the problem is I have to know the product, consume the product, and then make an accurate estimate, much like beer. But
Absolutely.
Hexo's got a beer coming out. I don't drink because I'm an alcoholic. But like, have you tried the beer? Is it something that's...
Well, it's not. It's really important to understand what it is and what it isn't. Now, first of all, it's not Hexo by itself. We did a joint venture with Molson Coors Canada. So the new company is called Truss, Truss, and they will make a line of cannabis-infused beverages. But importantly, it will not be an alcohol plus cannabis beverage.
Perfect.
Right?
That's what I want. I know Adam doesn't drink either.
Yeah, and Health Canada would never let us put the two together because it's not a good idea.
It is and it isn't. Like it depends on the person, right? Like if I'm really drunk when I was drinking, yeah, pull me aside, smoke a joint with me, I'll level out, I can keep partying till 2 a.m. But that was at a different time, a different place.
And you have to know yourself really well and how you respond, and you can make that individual decision. But for a company to put those two things together, for someone who's naive to one or both of those products, can put them in a dangerous situation. So we don't want to do that, but I mean, people are free to do what they want to. If they want to have a cannabis-infused beverage and then a glass of wine after, I mean, that's going to be up to them. Yeah. We can't control that. But this will be a line of different beverages, so you'll have, THC-infused beverages. You'll have CBD-only infused beverages for people who want it, again, more of a wellness drink. You think about, electrolytes and CBD and maybe some other health-related products in there. With time, I think that's what we'll see on the market.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited for it. I need to stop drinking soda so much.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at the substitution effect, people using one product instead of another. In Colorado, Washington State, after 5 years, what you do see is a reduction in alcohol consumption and, importantly, a reduction in opioid prescriptions.
Yes.
And, it's hard to know causation versus correlation, but that's why alcohol companies are getting involved in cannabis, because they see their revenues are threatened by legalization of cannabis. Because, as you said, people might drink, but then if they switch over to cannabis, they're probably not going to have another 2-3 glasses of wine after that.
Yeah.
So it does impact the amount of alcohol that is being consumed. And from a public health perspective, I can tell you that's a very good thing.
Yeah. Oh, man. I can't tell you how much time was wasted with a doctor spending money looking at my liver, thinking, maybe I messed it up from drinking. And that sucks from a public health perspective, too, because there's your taxes being wasted on something that was able to be solved with a pill because I cut myself. But on that topic, the BC Centre for Substance Use, which we set up when I was health minister, is the largest center of addiction training in North America. And they're looking at cannabis for helping people with other addictions. And in fact, I was told about one patient who was an alcoholic that was needing a liver transplant because of the cirrhotic liver caused by alcohol use. And so they got that person to start using cannabis. And even though, they had to use a lot of cannabis, their liver now has come back to a point where she no longer is in danger of needing a liver transplant. So, you think about that multiplied, across the province. That means there are definitely public health benefits to cannabis legalization, and we need more research to really drill down on what those are. So I'm curious, like, in BC, there's like 31 LPs that have signed agreements with the NDP government or whatever the government is.
BC-LDB, yes.
Yeah. Why is there, like, being that BC is known world-renowned for its bud, why is there only like 7? Why is there so little? Any ideas why that would be, or opinions?
Yeah. The licensed producer system was created under the medical marijuana regulations. And so if you look at who's going to use medical marijuana? You have to get a physician's authorization or a nurse practitioner. Then you have to go to a licensed producer. Well, the cannabis culture in BC is so strong, and the gray market dispensary system was so strong that most people didn't bother going to get a medical authorization. They just went to these dispensaries and never utilized the licensed producers. You compare the use of licensed producers in Alberta versus BC. Alberta is like 5 times higher. So that means there wasn't a lot of incentive for British Columbia companies to get a license from Health Canada. Well, now with legalization, you have to be a licensed producer, and so there's a scramble on from British Columbia companies to get into the legal market. So we will see that increase with time, and there's some great growers in BC, and they'll bring that BC bud into the legal market, and so I'm sure that this province will still play a leading role in that culture.
Do you think there's still room for like the craft cannabis, kind of like the craft beer world to exist?
Yeah, I do. Health Canada created the micro-cultivator and micro-processor classes of licenses. So you don't need to be, like us with 1.3 million square feet of growing space. You can have 200 square meters and be a craft cultivator and focus in on, that real high quality, that terpene profile, whatever the strains
that's
are.
the shit that I'm smoking.
Right.
Because I know the growers and I've seen their location, right?
Right. Yeah, and so I think there is a market for that, and the legal system will allow for that. But again, it's going to take some time because you have to go through the hoops. And Health Canada is a big bureaucracy. It takes a lot of time to work through the process.
God, I hate bureaucracy.
Yeah, but that's life, bureaucracy helps keep our society ticking along and helps provide that sort of that framework that we all depend upon. We hate it until we really need it.
Sure, but you have to also believe in democracy so strong that there's a series of checks and balances that even if you do something radical, you're going to get checked when you need to get checked.
Yeah, but you think about, okay, if we didn't have the bureaucracy in public health, for instance, and, then food producers or restaurants, they wouldn't have to worry so much about E. coli. I mean, look at the lettuce situation we just had. The Health Canada, shut that down before a lot of people, no one died, I don't believe, in Canada. So those regulations are onerous sometimes, but at the end of the day, I'd rather have them than not have them.
Yeah. I'm just one of those young guns who doesn't understand the system.
Yep.
And doesn't, unfortunately, have time to understand the system because I'm trying to, keep a roof over my head, right?
Yeah,
so it's like,
sure.
It's like, I'd rather just take a stab and see if I can get a reaction, and then maybe something will change. Who knows?
Yeah, I totally understand that because sometimes I get frustrated by it. As a large company, we get frustrated by it, believe me, because it sets you off of your schedule and, people's jobs and livelihoods are depending on this. But at the end of the day, I think we're a stronger country because we have strong institutions. And I have great respect for bureaucrats, having worked in government both at the local and provincial level. I know how hard they work and what a tough job it is because you're caught in the middle, right? I mean, you've got these stakeholders out there that want you to move things along really quickly. You've got politicians that are promising things that, may not be that easy to produce. And so I think we're well served by them, but yeah, it's a natural frustration.
I'd much rather have you leading $1 billion company than Cheech and Chong, but hey, they're also a $1 billion.
I wouldn't be here without people like Cheech and Chong.
No, you wouldn't. But they're also a $1 billion entertainment
Yeah,
industry.
exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So they, actually, let's talk about that because, like, a big part of stoner culture, cannabis culture, like I need to remove cannabis culture to stoner culture and vice versa. They're so intermixed, it's difficult. But the prolific smoking a joint while driving the car on a crazy adventure, going to White Castle. How do we transition out that part of it? Because there is medical users who need to medicate and drive,
right.
But there's also like this. Okay, Cheech and Chong. I don't want to say you're impaired, but you make the jokes you're impaired.
Well, they certainly would be if they were, baked and driving. But you look at drinking in the 1970s when I was in high school and college. I mean, people drank and drove all the time. And I'm ashamed to say that, we all did. And today we don't. And my kids don't because they understood from...
In your areas, maybe not. Ottawa Valley? there's billboards on the side of roads saying "Don't drink and drive," where people that I'm connected to have,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it happens in the culture.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and it's not like it's eliminated. I'm just saying it's gotten better. And I think the same with cannabis. People will understand that, you might think you're driving extra slow, but your reaction time is going to be affected. And so if something pops out in front of you, you're not going to be able to react, appropriately, or a car swerves towards you. So, people know that they should not drive impaired, whether it's because of alcohol, whether it's because of cannabis, whether it's because of sleeping pills or lack of sleep. I mean, those are things, when you're driving a 2,000-pound piece of metal down the highway, you really need to have your wits about you.
Totally. But they look at the numbers from, like, Dr. Ian Mitchell here in town, right? You're looking at, like, what is it, like 80% increase in impairments on cannabis versus 1,600% increase in alcohol.
No question.
Right?
No question.
So it's interesting. I want to flip the script. The Olympics. Is there any chatter about how cannabis and Canada's use of cannabis will affect their Olympic athletes?
Well, first of all, CBD has been removed from the world doping.
That's awesome.
So now you have Olympic athletes that will be able to use a cannabis product. Cannabidiol, the non-intoxicating part of cannabis.
The healing one, the one that they need to talk about more.
Yes, the one I use every day.
Not the hemp-based extract, the industrial hemp-based extract is.
Oh, that'll come. That'll come. I mean, really, CBD is a molecule, and so whether you get it from a hemp plant that has 4% CBD, or you get it from one of our high CBD producing strains, if you're just talking about CBD in oil, it's the same molecule. There are lots of people who say, well, you need the entourage effect of the terpenes, and maybe you need a little bit. You need a little bit of THC in there. I don't. I can't put up a strong argument either way, but I know that CBD alone does have medical benefits and has a physiological response. And it's nice to see the World Doping Agency say, you know what, it's okay to use that. Now, when we get to THC, I think there'll be a day when people say, well, that's okay too, because it's not like it's not like steroids. It's not going to go out and make you meaner on the ice or on the track.
No, it allowed me to run 50K on 3 hours sleep.
Right. And it may make you think you're running really fast.
No, I finished last, but I finished. I didn't train much for it. I just did it. And I wholly believe I would not have been able to do it without cannabis.
Well, you probably would have been faster if you hadn't stopped at all the snack stations along the way.
That's the thing, though. You don't
get the munchies?
I'm not a munchie person. Because some of it's bred out of it. Like, somehow, I've heard.
I think it's an individual thing, and this is the fascinating part about cannabis. You've got the genetic makeup of each individual strain. That's the genotype. And then the conditions under which it's grown produce what's called the phenotype, how the plant actually looks and how the genes are expressed in the plant.
Oh, interesting.
And then you put all of that into a person that has their own genetic
and their
makeup.
own cannabinoids in their head.
Exactly. And they've got their genetics, but they've also got their environment and how they're feeling that particular day, other things their body's dealing with. It is hugely complex. It's not like ethyl alcohol where you've got one molecule, you're putting it into a body, it's quickly absorbed into the brain, and we kind of know what the effects are. Cannabis is way more complex than that, and so that's why we always tell people you have to know how it affects you and how one type of cannabis versus another type of cannabis affects you. Because edibles, for instance, people really get screwed up on edibles because they don't understand the pharmacokinetics of eating something and waiting for it to take effect.
I have a low tolerance for edibles.
Right.
Like 20 milligrams, you might have a hint that I'm high. 30 milligrams is probably a good idea. 40 milligrams,
Yeah.
But I'm still functional.
Yeah.
60, that's a six-pack, and I'm done.
Well, man, 10 milligrams is all I need. And, and I don't really like that feeling so much. I guess I'm just more used to, having a couple of glasses of wine and knowing how that's going to affect me.
Yeah, that's fair.
But it's a matter of education. So, I'm when concentrates come out and vaping is available, I'm going to start trying different things just to see how I react. But as I say, the THC part of the molecule of the plant isn't as interesting to me as the CBD.
So vaping's an interesting topic, for multiple reasons. Because the word vape is tied so heavily to the tobacco industry, and we see them moving into the cannabis industry. I have a vape pen in my pocket. with shatter, and it's my preferred use of having a quick hit now. I'm concerned about the high school students and how in love they are with these tobacco nicotine patches,
right.
and now we're using the term vape in a cannabis sense, and their brains are still developing, right? Like, how do you think we can create a solid division in that crossover? Because vape might be the bridge. Young kids don't smoke as much weed as people think they do, but they vape a shit ton.
Yeah, I mean, the whole e-cigarette thing, we dealt with that, when I was in the health ministry, and it is alarming, the number of high school students that are vaping, and, I mean, they're taking in a load of nicotine, and nicotine is toxic. Small amounts, one thing.
The Juuls, one thing has more than,
4 packs of cigarettes.
Yeah,
I know.
It's
ridiculous. I know.
They just came to Canada, and it's a cool thing because it's juuling. It's strawberry flavor, banana,
And those are all illegal, by the way. And so
no, they're being sold at stores.
Yeah, they are sold at stores, but they're totally unregulated. And Health Canada needs to provide stronger regulations around vaping. I think this is going to become a public health issue that's just sitting under the surface. But when you think about vaping cannabis, I think young people some of them are doing that now. And yeah, will they, probably illegally vape once the concentrates come onto the market? Probably, but I would say that if you had a hierarchy of things, heavy drinking, heavy nicotine vaping, or using cannabis by vape, yeah, I don't know. I think probably cannabis is still the lowest on that hierarchy.
Totally. Now, we chat for 26 minutes, and I'm very grateful for the series of half-baked emails I sent off by accident. Is there any topics that you wanted to talk about? Because, this is a conversation. I just want to...
Yeah, I think one area that is interesting to see is talk about stigma. And we've kind of been talking a bit about stigma in the cannabis culture. And, I would say that I was guilty of stigmatizing cannabis users for years and years. And I think that is changing dramatically. And just to give you examples, I have a friend that, lives in Kamloops, and we were at a dinner party one night, a bunch of couples that, we all hung out together in Aberdeen, and, our kids all played soccer together, that type of a crowd. And we were talking about the opioid crisis, and I talked about cannabis as possibly being something that might help us out of the opioid crisis. Anyway, a couple of weeks later, my wife was walking with one of her friends from that group, and the friend admitted that she'd been using cannabis from one of the local dispensaries because she had such terrible insomnia related to aging that it was really starting to make her life miserable. And the cannabis had essentially turned that around, and she said, it saved my life. And so many baby boomers going through, the aging process in their late 50s, early 60s, even into their late 60s, are now looking at cannabis as a way to make life better for them. And so I think that's something that's really interesting and really will drop the stigma down. And so we'll have to think about cannabis in different ways than we used to think about cannabis. People will use it for wellness during the week, and then maybe, to enhance their experience on the weekend. Totally. It won't be the same thing each time they use it.
So I'll have to ask you, what level of impairment do you think I was during our conversation? I had a couple of pulls before I walked on in.
To me, you were like you'd had maybe a couple of glasses of wine. I can see that your eyes are a little bit,
This is like my happy level, you know?
Okay, yeah. You're kind of cruising.
Yeah.
Which is fine. You can carry on a conversation. Obviously, your mind is still working really well, but you've got this sort of calm air, and you're just kind of floating, which is not bad. I wouldn't want to see you driving that way, but by having a conversation and a good time, it's great.
Yeah. Well, the flip side is you see the crazy manic side of me, right? So it's like that's a whole other interesting side of things is cannabis in the mental health world, which
yes.
is totally unknown, right? Because
not totally, but it's a worrisome area that we certainly need more research.
Yeah. I had a good friend, world-class kayaker, went to California to make some money years ago, trimmed some bud, had unlimited supply, bipolar episode.
Right.
It's like, and my parents obviously saw that in me a couple months ago or whatever. B, how do we manage that as we transition into a recreational situation where Kamloops could have 7 pot stores by next year? 7?
Yeah.
Which is a lot by a lot of people, which is not that a lot by alcohol standards.
No, it's
or
not.
by the amount of weed that my wife thinks I smoke standards.
Right.
So how do we bring mental health into the conversation when, in my opinion, all cannabis is medicinal, but we have this recreational market of a medicinal product?
Well, cannabis can be medicinal, but it can be recreational.
Yeah.
But I would say we need to, with young people in particular, really talk about cannabis in a very open and honest way. And the Canadian Students for Sensible Drug Policy is an organization of young people across Canada that has created a toolkit which is really useful for teachers, parents to use to talk about their kids. And my daughter Stephanie is a scientific advisor to that group, so I know the work really well. And those are the sorts of things we need to do to make sure that parents can tell their kids or see in their kids, if you've got some tendencies in your personality that would make you susceptible to, some of the potential mental health effects of cannabis, then you need to know that. And doesn't necessarily mean you don't use cannabis. It means you don't use it heavily, or you think about the type of cannabis you're using and maybe a balance of THC and CBD, because we know that CBD offsets a lot of the negative impacts of THC. So that, we just need to learn a lot more and know our own bodies and how we react. But, when it comes to mental health, there's some really promising research on CBD for use in bipolar disorder, for use in schizophrenia, things that people always thought cannabis would make worse. But in fact, a component of cannabis may in fact be very beneficial. That's why we need to do the research.
No, totally. I like fact-based research stuff. Where should we look for good Canadian government-approved or leading Canadian scientists fact-based research? Because I don't trust anyone outside of Canada right now.
Well, Israel has done a tremendous amount of good research, and we see the medical market opening up all over Europe and Australia. So lots of research will go on. But I just met with the head of the Cannabis Directorate of Canadian Institutes for Health Research. So they're putting an integrated cannabis research strategy together that will be unveiled in 2019. And then you've got companies like Canopy Growth that put $2.5 million into the cannabis professorship at UBC. So MJ Malloy will be looking at cannabis as an exit drug for other types of addiction. So the amount of research going, we're working with the University of Ottawa, Dr. Corey Harris, doing some work on different impacts and like vaping, for instance. How much are you actually getting of the cannabis when you vape it versus smoking it? And we just need to know much more about this product and about how the body metabolizes it, how it excretes it, and that will happen in Canada. We have a chance to lead the world in this kind of research now.
Yeah, hopefully we do. For Hexo Corp, I remember walking into the Central Pub for what was it? One of Daryl Schmidt's drinking socials for Kamloops people, and I saw the Hexo Corp above the urinal advertising, right? And this was before legalizations or whatever it be. And I found out there's cannabis advertising awards, and there's an award show you guys won recently and stuff. How does that make sense? Because I thought you guys weren't allowed to advertise, but now you have award shows for advertising.
Yeah, it's well, first of all, you can advertise, but it's very, very strictly regulated. So the reason you saw those kind of ads in a bar is because that's an age-gated environment. So no one under 19 is going to be able to go in there. So you're talking to people who are legally allowed to consume cannabis. But you can't talk about, the real effects of cannabis. You can't say, for instance, that, this will make you feel a certain way or that it's associated with a particular lifestyle. Like CBD, to me, would be very interesting for people that are into sports and athletics. But we can't really associate it with those lifestyles because heaven forbid, we give people the impression that cannabis can be a good thing. So we have to observe those regulations, and so we have to be creative. We had the Never Jaded tour, so we had Wu-Tang Clan and Our Lady Peace, Maddie Matheson doing some cooking.
Good Vice plug right there.
Yeah. So we were, we were associating our name with these other products, if you like, but we really couldn't talk about cannabis. We could just talk about Hexo and staying curious.
So, like, would Hexo, in theory, be able to, like, sponsor a content creator who, like, smokes weed and then goes for a run, for example? Is that, how does the content creator world of, like, because literally you're going to end up having people showing your products, trying to make,
Right. So we can't use influencers, which is, we can't pay for influencers. That doesn't mean to say that, we can't.
Can you develop your own house of influencers? Like, be like, you are now our influencers, and build them?
No.
You can build influencers days for, like, really cheap.
Yeah, no, we have to be really careful about that. But, for instance, earned media. So I Run Magazine did an article on me. I like to run half marathons and 10Ks and things like that. So I Run Magazine did an article on sort of my background and around the work I do in cannabis. Not really talking about cannabis itself. And then you get advertisers, like we took out an ad in that I Run magazine, again, just talking about our corporation, not about the product.
Yep.
So you have to be really careful. So we're up for some ad awards. So we also won Best Product of the Year for our Elixir CBD spray at the Canadian Cannabis Awards. All of this is really developing, but it's very strictly regulated, and sometimes frustratingly so. But we always knew government would start out very conservative.
So would you be able to hire like I hired a high school kid to, like, make weekly edits for me? Would you be able to hire a kid, like, once a week to, like, follow you around for an hour and then make you an edit to post on your Instagram? Is that?
Oh yeah, I mean we have a digital marketing team. So we think about those sorts of things, and a lot of us have our own personal accounts. Yeah. So I can really talk about anything I want on my personal accounts, my own opinion. It's not necessarily the view of the company. But no, we do have a Hexo Corp account, which is mostly for investors.
Yeah.
Then we have a Hydropothecary site for our medical users, and then a Hexo site for adult users. But again, very strict, kind of information that we can put on those sites.
Do you have any idea how much you paid for Hexo.com?
I don't actually.
That would be ridiculously expensive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do know that, last year we probably spent between $5 and $10 million on marketing, which is a fair amount in an area where it's hard to market.
Yeah, absolutely. Or, like, even just getting, like, at Hexo on Instagram, like, you don't, like, that's called an OG on Instagram, right? It's tough to get because you're Terry Lake 16 on Twitter, right? But if you could be Terry Lake, that has more value to you, right? In theory, this is the internet culture.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff,
right?
No,
I get that, and you're right. So we were lucky. We're not lucky, and we thought about those domain names, obviously, and we probably had to pay a certain amount to get them. But in the order of magnitude of things that are cost drivers for us, it was fairly small, I think.
For sure. Well, I guess I'm going to have to get going soon, and I thank you. So one last question. When do you think, so Campbell's has 7 stores coming along. We got 3 of those going to be, like, government stores.
Right.
Do you think we'll see a private store open up before the next 2 public stores, or is it going to be the
Well,
the
I understand
first?
There's a couple that have been approved by City Council, and now they're just waiting for the provincial approvals. So whether or not the government, other government ones open or not, I think within a few months, you'll see both private and public stores here in Kamloops.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Terry, where can people find out more information about you or what you stand for or your company that you're involved in? Drop your socials.
Well, I'm at Terry Lake 16 on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn, and then our Hexo is at Hexo Corp or at Hexo or at Hydropothecary, all the different sort of divisions we have. And, happy to give people information about what we're doing and where we're going in this crazy world.
Yeah, thank you so much for meeting with me here and let me record a cameo. I'm sure you didn't know what to expect. And to whoever is listening and in their head is like, Twitter, what's Twitter? Twitter's dead. Twitter set this up. Believe in Twitter in Canada because it's all journalists or politicians.
Yeah.
And if you want attention in this weird attention economy, get on Twitter.
And follow Brendan Shaw, by the way.
Yeah.
Great. Brendan's a great guy. I'm glad he's sponsoring the show.
Yeah.
People need to find out more about him.
I
and
told
his
him
company.
he was going to pay my student loans, but the money hasn't made it to my student loans yet, and they've been calling me. So, if someone else wants to sponsor my podcast, the National Student Loans Association or whatever Canada wants their money. But anyways, thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe to Cameo wherever you listen to podcasts. If you want, you can go on iTunes, leave me a review. That actually helps out a lot. My podcast was actually named podcastingbusinessjournal.com's one of their top 10 local podcasts. He left a hilarious little blurb about me. And if you have a couple bucks and want to support, me maybe paying for this because it costs me a little bit of money, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/cameo podcast. Thanks again.
Yeah, because my fee is like $3,000 to do this. So people.
Yeah. Actually, funny you say that. I actually do have a rapper who is looking for a sponsor for $3,000.
Oh, see, that's a going rate.
Actually, wouldn't be a bad.
I did get a cup of coffee, Nev. So thanks for that.
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Terry.
You're
and till next time, Merry Christmas. I'll have this up before Christmas. So Merry Christmas, because we're gonna say that. It's
All right.
allowed.
Merry Christmas.